Aloha and welcome to the Alex Alexander Show. I have Mark Dolfini here, the landlord coach. Welcome, Mark. And I already said before that I'm jealous of his name. He got this great title right off the bat, the landlord coach. I love it. And it sounds exactly like that's what he does. So we're going to spend a little time talking. And I wanted to tell you from the beginning that I found you and I really enjoyed not only watching your show, but watching your show get better and better over time, very quickly, actually. And that's been really fun to watch you develop also while you're developing, other people. So let's start and let you talk about yourself. Let's introduce yourself. And I'll introduce myself first. I'm Alex Alexander. That's Aiden Alexander in the background. He's running the show. Thank you, sir. And let's let you talk about yourself a little bit. I'm excited to hear.
Well, aloha back. I'm equally as jealous because my homestead here in Indiana, while I love it and the sunsets are beautiful and the sunrises are beautiful, I don't know that I think they pale maybe somewhat in comparison to the ones that you get to see there in Hawaii. But you got to love where you live regardless of where you're at, right?
That's right.
That's right. Well, I appreciate the time on the show. Many people know me as the landlord coach, but of course I do a lot of other coaching for people who just have small businesses. But the main thing that I'm about, really, I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm about my God, my gal, my sons, and my guns, and they pretty much all revolve around that. That's pretty much what I'm passionate about altogether. But none of that would be possible if I didn't have time wealth, if I didn't have control of my calendar, if I was more focused on income generation than I was on life output. And that doesn't mean that I've rejected that whole thought of, well, that's just you being lazy. There's lots of people who have control of their calendar, but they don't do anything. Well, I've also raised my standard to a certain lifestyle that I want. And, it's not bad to improve, but I don't want that to be the focus of my life. I was put here on this planet with very specific gifts. And if I'm not honoring God in that way by doing that, not to be weird religious about it, but if I'm not honoring him in terms of what my gifts are and why I'm here, then I think it's just a waste of what I could be for other people.
That is really well said. Can you talk about, you mentioned the core when we were talking the other day, and I purposely didn't ask you any more about it because I wanted to talk about it here. Tell us that's the Marine Corps, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So you're a United States military veteran. Thank you for your service. And tell us about your time in the Corps. And then since then, I really am interested in some beginning foundations of your character and things like that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking, and it was my honor. Thank you for saying that. The Marine Corps was very good to me. It was very good for me. I only served 4 years. I was a navigator. I was actually a celestial navigator on C-130s. So it was it's definitely not, it's not even being taught anymore, from as far as I know, because now GPS is, on everything, it's on our phones, it's in our cars, it's, in airplanes and all sorts of things. But we were still shooting celestial lines of position going from, I was stationed in Okinawa, and we would land there at Hickam sometimes, and which was always, that's like a 12 or 13-hour flight in a C-130, where you watch the sun come up, the sun go down, and the sun come back up again, and you're still in the airplane. So you're like, are we ever going to get off this thing? But one of my last flights was to Hickam there in Honolulu, and we landed, and it was just amazing to be able to have experiences like that as a young guy. I was in my early 20s, and getting to see the world, and some great places of the world, like there at Hickam or in Honolulu, and some not so great places, but that's okay. It was an honor to serve that, and that really did start the foundation in terms of a lot of different things that I learned in as a young man that was getting ready to go to college. I was getting ready to go start my own path in terms of starting a business of my own, getting into a lot of different things, a lot of different activities. I went to the field of accounting for a while. I was in the field of banking for a while. And all of those things were based on the things that I learned from the Marine Corps. So I was really, really very blessed in terms of my time in the Marine Corps.
Most of the folks that I've talked to, I don't find that surprising that a lot of it's linked back. A lot of success is linked back. That's why I wanted to talk about some of those core, those founding principles. And you were probably, I think I was in Okinawa probably maybe when you were there. We probably went through, because I've taken that flight on a C-130 before from to Guam and all over the place.
Oh yeah, yeah. Were you in the service?
Yes, I was in the Air Force, and
okay.
We traveled quite a bit. We did some of the time I was in one of the bands called Tops and Blue, and so we went to 180 countries, and I got to do that twice. So we traveled extensively. So that flight you're talking about,
oh yeah,
we took it in a KC-130 before, which was pretty interesting.
Yep, that's what I was on. I was in a KC-130 refueler. So that's
wow.
the K designation means it's a refueler.
Right. So about how tight it is, even more tight, being close and far back with a large group of people, and so that was a long flight.
Yeah. So you probably landed somewhere. You probably took off in Honolulu, went to Kwajalein. From Kwajalein, you went to Guam, and then from Guam, I did that flight several times. In Kwajalein, I'm pretty sure. What's that?
Well, now it's amazing. Now we work with people from Kwajalein. Since we're here in Hawaii, we work with tons of Pacific Islanders, and so they talk about the base and the people who built the airport and all that kind of thing. It's really amazing.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about whenever you got out of the military. I want to know kind of the history of how you progressed through different. You mentioned that you did some different things, some banking and some accounting. Tell me how you progressed through that, and like some of the steps from one kind of career to another kind of career, and how you transitioned.
Yeah, I mean, I was very blessed in that I had some foresight in terms of the fact I wanted to go to a large university, because I recognized that the chances of me wanting to change my mind from majors was pretty likely. So I actually got accepted to Purdue for hospitality management, hotel tourism, things like that. So because I like to travel and I really enjoyed it, but I recognized pretty quickly that it just really wasn't where my passion was. So when I got to school, I was there for a semester or two, and I was like, this is great, but this isn't really what I want to do, long term. And I got a job right away. So I worked at a bank, and so I could learn banking. But I was also in school at the time for this, RHIT is what it was called, Restaurant, Hotel, and International Tourism. But it really wasn't where I wanted to go. So I started working for a hotel at the same time. So I worked for a bank part-time. I worked for a hotel part-time doing the night. In fact, the hotel job was actually a full-time job because I was the night auditor. And then I was going to school full-time. So it was crazy. It was a crazy schedule. And I don't know why I did this to myself to punish myself, but it was a lot, right? So I kind of worked through that. And at the time I really had an interest in real estate, just as really more of a store of wealth, but also just because it was so easy to get into. And at the time, the banking regulations were definitely not what they are today. So I got to learning how banks loaned money. And when I was working for a bank, I was on the deposit side, just a simple teller. I wasn't doing much. I was, did some customer service stuff, but really it was just kind of more just handling dirty paper. But from that side of it, I learned how to borrow money and how the banks underwrote loans, and I learned all of that stuff. So it was a really interesting evolution because I was working myself to death. Plus, I started buying rental properties. And by the time I got out of college, about 4 years later, now I did change degree objectives. I actually changed to the School of Management, which was Craner, there at Purdue. And I ended up graduating with a degree in accounting and a minor in finance. So I did change over after that first year. Went to the School of Management and Accounting and Finance, and by the time I graduated from school, I had about a dozen rental properties altogether, which was about $500,000 worth of real estate. So I was able to be a little creative and did some wheeling and dealing while I was in school.
You got it done quick right there at the beginning while you were still in school. 12 is a nice amount to have right out of school already.
Yeah, it was, well, it was about 12 units. I said 12 properties. That's not quite accurate, but it was about 12 units altogether. Some were duplexes and so forth, but I was very aggressive in terms of growing. Now, that was the beginning of a lot of mistakes that I had made, and I was buying properties that I really had no business buying. Just because they were for sale didn't mean that I should have bought it. So, and there seems to be a lot of that going on right now, where just because a property goes on the market, man, people they're on that like a disease. But that's the nature of things right now.
Yeah, it is. It really is. You were your coaching. You had mentioned before, and I was really interested in this. You're talking about these properties that you have, and then you got into coaching people also to be landlords. But you were talking about how it's not just landlord coaching. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so it probably there's another before I go on to that, it probably is it's important to say what the rest of the story is, as Paul
Oh,
Harvey might
yes.
say, right? So
Good.
as I grew this business and I ended up actually leaving the banking industry, I left the deposit side and I actually went and started working for the commercial side of a bank, which was the underwriting side. I was the underwriter for commercial loans that were over $500,000. Anything that was under 500,000, the loan officers had loan authority for. Anything that was the aggregate over 500,000, it came across my desk. And I looked at a lot of different types of loans. And now I'm an upstate New Yorker. That's where I grew up. I'm a Hoosier now, and Hoosier, Indiana's my home. But at that point in time, I didn't know anything about agriculture. I mean, they were mostly dairy and apples up in upstate New York where I was, right? Here it's hogs and soy and corn and chickens. Like I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know what, they started throwing out phrases like parvo, and I'm thinking, well, I don't even know what that is. Is that something that's bad? It sounds really bad, right? And it's like, oh yeah, that's really bad,
Oh,
and
it's bad.
things like this. So, different bushels per acre and stuff like this, all, and I'm like thinking, holy crap. And I learned so much from these people that were lenders. And it was really, really amazing learning, again, learning the commercial side of banking, not just the residential side, but the commercial side of banking it was just fundamentally different. Whereas the residential side, they look at, debt to income, where the commercial side looks at debt service coverage. And even though it's just a different way to skin a cat, not right or wrong, it's just different. So I had to learn all these different phrases and just verbiage and all this stuff. And it was such a good place to learn, because there was so much lending going on at the time. And the interest rates and everything was all crazy. I mean, everybody was watching Alan Greenspan like he was, like it was a second coming or something.
You became
But
a rock
hey,
star all of a sudden.
oh, it was crazy, right? It was a crazy time. So,
Michael Burry, and people are lighting lighters like it's a
yeah,
concert.
it was crazy. Exactly. Yeah. So that was when I finally did graduate from school. That was during school, because I was still working full time and several different jobs. And then I ended up graduating, and I ended up taking an accounting job with the Marriott, which is a wonderful, wonderful company to work for. And I worked as an assistant controller, basically as a corporate accountant for them in St. Louis. So I worked for them for a while, and then it was one morning that I was driving to work. And now keep in mind, I grew up in New York, so I was listening to KMOX there, their radio station in St. Louis, and I was about 10 minutes away, and they came on and reported that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I thought that's bizarre. Like, how could that even possibly happen? It's not like they just built them. They've been there since the 70s. And then a few minutes later, it wasn't long. And then, of course, we realized it was 9/11 was going on, and the whole world changed. And it changed for a lot of people. No work got done that day. We were all just very, concerned and worried about what was going on. I had lots of people that lived and worked in downtown Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan. So it was a crazy time. But the thing that probably changed a lot for me as I take myself back, was the jumpers. And as kids, you'd always say, well, if you jumped off the Empire State Building, right? And, you always say silly things like that. But here were people, and I didn't particularly love my job at the Marriott. It wasn't a bad job, and it certainly was a wonderful company to work for, but it wasn't a job for me. And I thought, how many of those people were kissing their loved ones for the last time and going to a job that didn't really fulfill them? And how many more years were they just felt like that's what they were going to do, that they obligated themselves to do that? And that's when I really decided to make the change. And that year, it wasn't much long after, it was actually within that year, I actually left the Marriott and went out on my own and did my own real estate stuff. So still worked a little bit, on the side, did some other accounting work, here and there. But ultimately, that's really when I made the decision to get out on my own. And then I grew my portfolio from there.
How many units would you say you had right about then? Because you already had some properties right about then, right?
Yeah, I had just shy of 30 at that point, because I had been buying more and more. And when you have rental income plus you have a W-2 job, it's a lot easier. And again, I knew what they were looking for, so it was really easy for me to get approved for loans. But then I could refinance and I could take some of that cash out, and that was easy at the time because money was really easy at that point in time. Money was loose. So it definitely made it a lot easier to buy properties and put money down. And there was places that I was able to buy, based on appraised value, not on market value. So money was definitely loose, and it did not. I'll just say this, and one of the more important lessons that I learned is, just because you can get into a deal with no money down does not make it a great deal. So that really changed a lot. It changed a huge amount of perspective, or added a lot of perspective for me out of that.
Because you can wind up with a lot of work on those ones and a lot of problems on those ones with no money down. There's a reason there's no money down, because people don't want them. They want you to take care of their problem.
Well, definitely. But the other side of that too, I mean, while the financing wasn't necessarily the problem was my underwriting. And when I was doing the cash flow analysis on these properties, and this is one of the things that, in terms of my coaching, and, and whether I'm coaching someone who has real estate or someone who has a business, if you're doing, let's say you put out your cash flow analysis, for your next quarter or whatever, and you have a bunch of expenses on there that, if you don't budget adequately enough for those expenses, those become jobs that you have to do. Right. So let's look at it from a very simple aspect of real estate. If you do a cash flow analysis and you didn't budget adequately enough for leasing expense, right, to pay someone to do the leasing, or property management, or to do the simple cleaning, right, or maintenance. If you didn't budget, or mowing the property, let's just say mowing the property in between vacancies, if you didn't budget for that, guess what? You just created a mowing job for yourself. You just created a leasing job for yourself, and on and on and on. So it's not, this problem isn't related or isn't isolated just to the real estate industry. It's all over, because people are creating jobs for themselves that they don't realize how much it takes away from them. Because if you can pay someone else to do that job $12 or $15 an hour, well, guess what? You just created a $12 or $15 an hour job for yourself. And most entrepreneurs I know, they want to make a lot more than that, and they're never going to get rich making that kind of money.
You're right. I had to tell my partners, I was like, on a deal we had a while back, I said, we're saving a ton of money because, we don't have to pay a general contractor because I'm doing this, and we don't have to pay an attorney because I'm writing up the deeds. And then I looked at it and I was just bragging about how much work I'm doing for free. And I was like, I'm just bragging about how foolish I am to just work for free. And so we had to redo that one a little bit. But you're definitely right. Just because it's cheap and no money down, or it seems like a great deal, that it really, without the exit strategy and without the plan to actually do something with it, it's just a problem. And creating more work for ourselves. Oh my gosh, how many times have I tell you what, one of the biggest breakthroughs I had was doing that, hiring out and having other people do it. And I had a mentor that told me, he stopped me and said, you're just running around like wasting all of your time. And it wasn't really a mentor, it was actually a partner. So it was his time and his money that was getting wasted also. So he was really
Yep.
interested, and he was like, you've got to start paying people. And he's like, this is going to sound horrible and you're going to hate it, but you need to start paying people $100 to do a $10 job. Because
Yep.
who's going to go in the yard, in this rocky, beat up yard that these tenants didn't take care of, and there's broken glass? It's only going to take about an hour or two to clean it up. But you're going to pay a guy $20 an hour, so $40 to go get on his knees and clean up old, from old beer and trash and glass. And you're going to have to pay him $100 to do a $10 job. So, or you
Yep.
go do it. And so his whole point was like,
Yep.
whenever you start working with other folks, and whenever I did, their whole point was, this is my money you're wasting running around doing this foolish $10 job that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was a
And
big
that's the
breakthrough for me.
conversation oh yeah, I had that. And that was very similar, like as again, we were starting to, as I was going through all this problem. And then of course, the Great Recession came along and wiped out a lot of things for me because I was so time weary, not just doing all the running around, but I basically had created 10,000 little jobs for myself, which were, started with opening the mail and, and answering the phone literally every 5 minutes. And sometimes I'd have 2 and 3 calls stacked up. And, the problem was, I had the really fundamentally was I never created a business for myself. I never created a fabric of the business. And that's really where the VIP method came from when I wrote The Time Wealthy Investor. Was the VIP method. Well, this is what I wrote in The Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, because I started teaching the VIP method, and other people were outside of the industry were starting to pick that up, and they're going, hey, I don't have any real estate, but could we talk? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm happy to talk with you. But because I have such an eclectic background in in finance and banking and all these, most of the stuff is so translatable. And again, I operate I have a property management company. Obviously I have Landlord Coach. I have several other businesses that I have. And because I've got such a varied background, it seems to translate quite well. And I was like, yeah, I think I can help you. In fact, I know I can help you because it's the same problem. And the problem was fundamentally this, because back when I lost, and I ended up losing quite a bit of properties, I built up a $6 million portfolio, which was 92 rental units. So when I ended up losing about 2/3 of those in about 8 months, and part of to add insult to injury, I was laying flat on my back in a hospital bed with double pneumonia because I'd nearly worked myself to death. I thought something had to change here. This was craziness. So I kind of had one of those talks that you have with yourself when you need to have them, and it was like, what is going on with me? Well, there's fundamentally 3 things that I thought, well, of all this stuff that's going on, the things that were wrong were fundamentally landing in 3 different buckets. And first of all, I had no processes. Everything was up in here. Everything was in my head. Everything, I didn't have any clue in terms of what it was I was trying to accomplish. It was all in my head. It was all very reaction based. It was what fire was burning the hottest at that moment in time, right? And this is me working anywhere from 16 to 18 hours a day, every day. So no time off, don't dare get sick, and just keep working, and hopefully at some point you'll get to the promised land, which was madness. So I had no processes. And secondly, even if I did have processes, I didn't have anything for those processes to run on. Meaning, like, okay, so let's say for argument's sake, I had someone that was going to answer my phone, right? Let's say I had a process for someone to handle a phone call. Well, my phone system looked just like this, right? Fits in your pocket. Maybe you're familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody runs off a cell phone nowadays. And I didn't, every single decision had to come through me. I was the toll booth that all the information had to flow through. So even if I did have processes lined out, I didn't have the infrastructure, meaning, I didn't have the basic bones of any business, the desks, the chairs, the phone system, a computer that sat on a desk, where someone else could go do work, right? So I didn't have any of that stuff. So I didn't have a process. I didn't have any infrastructure. I mean, I ran most of it out of my truck in a trailer with a laptop on a laptop stand and a printer that sat in the back seat. It was craziness. So that was the infrastructure and process part. But fundamentally, more than anything else, I lacked a clear direction. I had no direction to head in. Again, and using the navigation, we talked about early on, it's like getting up in an airplane and then taking off and then deciding where we want to go. And I'm like, man, we're burning up fuel and terra firma here. We got to figure out where we're going to go here, right? Otherwise you're just going to start flying around in circles. And that's exactly what I did. I had lacked no vision for really what I wanted to accomplish in my life. Forget business for a minute. Why was I doing this? I mean, I'm not an idiot. I mean, I'm a pretty smart guy. I know I could probably do a lot of things well, but why am I doing this? And finally, when I came down to it, that's how the VIP method was born. I mean, it's not like it was, spelled out in the sky in doves or anything, but it was like, it was vision, infrastructure, process. And it has to go in that order. Vision, what do you want to accomplish? What is it you're specifically looking to do? What is it you're specifically trying to accomplish for your life? And I promise you, it has nothing to do with the number of rental units. It has nothing to do with how many widgets you sell. It has nothing to do with, how many roofs you put on in a year, or how many, how many whatever's you're doing, how many clients you see in a year. It has everything to do with why you're personally here. Let's say if you woke up with $100 million in your bank, what would you do from day to day, right? So that's the real question, is what is your vision? And then secondly, then you start to put an infrastructure together that's in alignment with that vision. Because if your vision is to lay on the beach for 2 weeks out of the year rubbing cocoa butter on your belly, that's going to be a terrible experience for you if your infrastructure is set up for you to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, right? So your vision, your infrastructure has to be in alignment with your vision. And then finally, of course, the process is all the tactical stuff. And that tactical stuff is, what runs on the infrastructure that you built and all stays in alignment with your vision for the future.
That's amazing. Hey, you're talking about infrastructure, and I feel like so many entrepreneurs, and I was stuck in this for years, like 10 or 15 years, to where infrastructure, this was my mental map. Infrastructure is a ball and chain, and it keeps me in an office, and it's equated with cubicle and fluorescent lights, no outside environment, office input. And so I had this mental block of office and infrastructure. I didn't put the word infrastructure until you were talking just now to lock it together, that's how it was linked in my brain, that office and infrastructure meant ball and chain and tied down and problem. So, coming from the artistic background, travel loving, all of those connotations were problem, danger, don't do that you're not going to enjoy your life doing that. And what's really amazing is since I've done it, we have an office now, we have 1,200 square foot. And just like you said, computers for somebody else to go sit on and do work, and writing down processes and writing as we're doing that. That's where the freedom is. That's not the ball and chain. That's the structure to have the freedom that you've been talking about.
Yep. Yeah, and you as a visionary, and I'm a visionary too, we need those integrators. We need those implementers that are going to do the work. And I promise you, you might be thinking, well, who in the world's going to want to sign up for that? A lot of people, because they enjoy that work, right? They, like you and I might say, who in the world would want to do that? Well, there's lots of people who want that. And there's lots of people right now, because of the way that the world has shifted in this post, COVID world, lots of people are working from home and they absolutely love it. And it's created this whole new generation of people who can actually design their ideal lifestyle where, now they get to spend more time with their kids. They now get to, they can enjoy, be more productive at home, and live, live a much more flexible schedule as long as the work gets done. Now, yes, that takes some trust, but that infrastructure does not have to look like, skyscraper and tower and clocking in with a, clunk, clunk, that doesn't exist anymore, right? Like that is, there are certain jobs that do require someone's physical presence, but, we've been operating now for over a year, about a year now, where the office has been closed, we're still at the office, but I can do this job as a coach anywhere. In fact, I was just talking to I have a chief of staff who is virtual, and my chief of staff, she says, hey, do you want me to carve out some time because I'm going to be traveling. I've got two groups I'm going to be speaking to back in Wisconsin in July. And she says, do you want me to carve out of your schedule, for no coaching sessions? I said, actually, no. I said, because I can do them from up there if my clients need me. I'm not, I mean, as long as I'm accessible, I don't care. They might need to reach me by phone instead of Zoom, but that would be, I'm sure they wouldn't mind that. And as a result, it just opens up so many other possibilities for me. That infrastructure doesn't have to look like what you're maybe thinking of. And sometimes that limiting belief that might have been holding you back, it just takes a little bit of a nudge from someone on the outside to go, dude, doesn't have to be that way anymore. It could be so much different.
That's right. I got lucky. I didn't have anybody nudge me. We kind of lucked into it. We actually, with office space being so cheap this last year, we found a place that was empty and just negotiated a really wonderful deal. And let's go back to what you were saying before. Just because it's a really great deal, it's a really cheap deal, it's a really economical deal. It didn't wind up being the best deal because, what you get what you pay for. It was cheaper. So we had to spend a lot of money on this and that. So it wound up not even being as cheap as we thought. And it's just like that seems to go across everything in this really kind of common sense. Your mom taught you, hey, you're not going to get Macy's quality if you're shopping at Kmart. That kind of thing really translates across all kinds of businesses to where you don't get the good quality contractors if you don't pay them. You don't get the good quality consultants if you don't pay them. We're going through something right now where we were looking at two different consultants, and one was about half the cost of the other one. And we just had one member of the group that was really wanted to go economical, and we were going back and forth for a little bit. And we did some more digging and just found tons of problems that this cheaper consultant had caused for their clients in the past. And the other member of our group that wanted to go cheaper was just really glad that we didn't go cheap, and said, man, can you imagine if we had to deal with those problems on our project if we'd have gone through with the cheaper. But anyway, I was really glad that we didn't just go with the easiest, cheapest, jump into every deal mentality. And it's really good that you're warning against that.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs, there's a few entrepreneurs that I know, and I say this in the context of, making a distinction where, you go from, we all start out in some way, especially if you're doing this on your own. We're all self-employed, but making that jump from self-employed to business owner is a very hard jump. And for me, it was like, watching the Hulk turn back into David Banner. It was like, weird and I was like, this, like my brain was rewiring, But it was when I started to make that shift, because I was so used to doing, like, hey, you know what? I needed to learn how to do that job. Well, that's what I'm going to do. And that was my dad's generation. Our dads, whatever they had to learn to do, they did. Right. I mean, I swear to God, at some point I was going to walk in and see my dad, doing brain surgery on the cat. Like, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Like, no, you can't rewire that, But that's the generation they grew up in. But this generation now is becoming so hyper specialized. It's like, everybody's, it's funny too. And I kid that everybody's got a coach for everything. There's like a dishwashing coach, and there's a tanning coach, and there's a laundry coach, like everybody's got a coach. There's a coach for every aspect of your life. But kidding aside, I do think that you do get what you pay for, but you've got to know where that limit is. And it's a really easy math problem. Once you figure out what your time is worth, let's say, you add up what you made last year and you divide that all out and figure out a daily rate, if you're making, even if you're only making $20 or $25 an hour, if you can hire someone to do a job for $12 an hour, which many foreign VAs can do, or even, whatever, if you can pay someone else $10 or $12 an hour for, now that's costing you 10, let's say it's $10. Now it's costing you $15 an hour if your billing rate is 25. So that's the thing. Like when you start doing that math and you go, oh, wait a minute, I can be more effective making $25 an hour okay, now I'm only going to be making 15, but I can be much more productive and much more effective and doing the job that I like. And that's where you really have to start, segmenting those things. And when I talk to everybody, no matter what the industry, there's those four segments that every business has to have. And you've got lead generation, you've got sales, you've got fulfillment, and accounting. Every single one of those four functions has to exist, and no matter what the business is, right? And of course, it expands from there once the enterprise gets bigger. But lead generation or marketing and sales are related, but they are not the same thing. When
Right.
people say, "Oh, I'm in sales and marketing," I'm like, "Which one?" Because they're two different things, right? But lead generation, sales, again, fulfillment, which is the thing you do, right? And then accounting. So no one person can be great at all four. It's just there's too much disparity in skill set to be great at all four. So, in the early days, yes, you have to do it all, but as quick as you possibly can, identify the areas that you're great in and get rid of the stuff you're not great in. Get it over to a virtual assistant or somebody else that can help you in the areas where you're weak.
I agree with that so much. And I used to do the math like you're talking about, and it didn't work for me to trigger my mind to say, don't do that because you're wasting money or time or whatever. What actually wound up working for me was I went, who do you think you are that you're going to do the accounting better than someone who is a professional accountant? You're letting
Right.
down everyone that you said, trust me with your money to invest with me, and I'll go and make us more money. Everybody that you said that to, you're letting them down because you're not giving them the best service that you could. You're doing the accounting. And so that worked in my mind to talk to myself that way and say, just who do you think you are? You're going to go borrow a hammer to build a house instead of hiring someone who's a professional. What are you thinking? Like, so I had to talk to myself that way, and it really worked to make fun of myself like
I
that.
love that. I love that a lot. Yeah, that's good. Borrow a hammer to go build a house. I love that.
You don't even have the tools to do the job that you're trying to do, and you're trying to, fix something with a butter knife or something. Come on, hire a professional.
Yeah.
So that worked to talk myself that way.
It was rougher because I came out of school with a degree in accounting, so of course I felt like I could do it all, And
of course,
oh man, it was just not. I mean, again, and although my background in accounting has been helpful for me, in some ways it's a hindrance because often the strength of the organization often becomes, or the strength of the individual, the strength of the founder often becomes the weakness of the organization. And that's because that's the last thing generally that the founder will let go, So you have to really be, and this is what I've noticed.
Can you talk about that like a case study or like an example of that? That's really interesting.
Yeah. So what I'm noticing now, so in one of my previous clients, and this was when I was early on, and I was trying to convince him. Again, he was so sucked into the organization, his own organizational stuff. He was a great salesman. I mean, he really was. Like he kind of guy that could sell voting machines to Castro. Just a really good salesman, and not like in a convincing and icky way, but just in a really, hey, I can solve problems for you sort of way. But he would not let go. He just wouldn't let it go. He could not let that go. He's fine. I convinced him to let go the accounting go and let this other stuff go. But because he wanted to hold on to that sales piece, now he did enjoy it, but he was he was expanding his family at that point in time. And the sales function, in his particular industry was it required him to be kind of Johnny on the spot. Like if someone called in, he needed to be able to pick up the phone and answer the call. Well, that could be Monday through Sunday, from 6 to 6, and that's just what he chose to do. And it really started to erode. Like it was just something he just we would not let go of. And it was definitely the bottleneck for the organization because he could not step out of it enough because he felt like other people just weren't doing it the same way that he was doing it or weren't making the same promises or whatever else it is. But it became the weakness of the organization, and he became the bottleneck where everything had to flow through. And now at the time, I didn't have the tools in my toolbox to recognize what it was, but it was self-sabotaging behavior, self-defeating behavior. And when, like one of the things that I talk about, in my coaching along quite a bit is, the self-sabotaging behavior shows up in so many ways because we have limiting beliefs that feel like we're not worthy of success or whatever it is. I mean, there's lots of, that's a whole other topic, whole other show probably. But, but designing a system that was so overly complex that only you can run, that's self-sabotage, right? Like most systems do not have to be overly complex or overly, I mean, this, especially in business. So he had designed this sales system that, he was basically the one, setting and spiking, he was the only one that could do it. And it was really, really tough. And unfortunately, I didn't have the tools in my toolbox to recognize it for what it was at that point in time. Now I do. Now I call it out pretty quick. I'm like, all right, man, hey, I don't know where he's at. I mean, he and I, we parted ways friendly. He's like, no, I think I've got my business to where I want it to be and appreciate all your help. And he's good. But I still wonder if the light bulb ever came on for him. But his business could have been 3 times what it was. But because he was constrained by himself being the only one that can answer the sales calls, that's definitely was one of the things that constrained his growth and certainly his lifestyle.
Boy, do I know that one. Everything we're talking about is exactly, I'm sure everybody deals with these things, but it's exactly the stuff that I'm dealing with and that we're dealing with in our different organizations. And so I found I used to be trying to attract people to take this stuff off of my plate. I was trying to like find people to hire, and it wasn't working. I went through this for quite a few years, and we were just constantly complaining about, oh, I can't find somebody who's good at this, and oh, I'm not finding this, and we just started working. I don't really know exactly how to explain it, but we became better, like everything, like in our entire lives, everything, like through gratitude and just being kindness and all the really small, basic, like your mom teaches, your grandma teaches, the Bible teaches, Bible school, and all these things, like real basic attitudes and mentalities really started to grow a lot of good qualities in our life. And that brought people into our life that goes, you're doing too much. Let me take that off of your plate. Well, also they see the benefit in it. They're not completely altruistic, but they really see, they're like, man, if I get in an organization with this person or this group or whoever, we've got to take some of that work away for them, or it's what's the point of being attached to them? They're just going to burn out. People can see it. Your organization will tell you, and I suggest listening to them, because we've kind of gone back and forth on the line of like my personal health and just being burnt out in time and too tired to even like making mistakes. Like actually, I never get so tired that I'm like, oh, I don't feel good. And it's just actual mistakes, like real dollar losing mistakes that I've made from being too overcommitted. And that's when I've woke up before and said, man, something's got to change. And the other people in the organization say, give me that task. And it really, really helps. Are you familiar also? I'm guessing you folks you're in the same vein with Dan Sullivan. Yeah. Who, not how? Are you familiar with that coach also?
I am. Yeah. He's that guy's just talk about living exactly what you were and what your purpose for. That guy's brilliant. Yeah. He's really good.
Yeah.
He's the coach's coach. Definitely. Yeah. He's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's the one, I think actually he got me from being interested in him, probably connected me over through Facebook with you. And because you talk about the same concepts and the same, you're really in a lot of the same vein with time wealth and time value. Right.
Yeah. I need to, I haven't really done much reading. I've never read any of his material, but if he's still around, I'm not even sure how old he is. But I'd like to go to one of his events, because I firmly believe too. And, if you remember the 7 habits of highly effective people, habit number 7 is sharpen the saw. And that's, it's not just being, obviously that includes rest, and includes, spiritual health. It includes clarity, lots of different things, but it also includes education about getting better, and honing your craft. And I feel like several years ago, I had said incorrectly, mind you, I had said that, not everybody needs a coach. It's just a coach will help you get faster, get you, I hope a coach will get you faster to where you want to go. But I said, but not everybody needs a coach. And I was dead wrong. I think everybody does need a coach. And earlier I was teasing about a tanning coach and a dishwashing coach and a laundry coach. But I mean, but whatever area of life you are trying to improve, who cares if it's a tanning coach or whatever? I mean, the point is that a coach will help you improve in the areas that you want to improve in. And it's defined by you. But the distinction that I see, I think coach is getting thrown around a little bit too loosely now, because a coach really is somebody that's going to hold you accountable. And a lot of times that person needs to be comfortable enough in themselves to throw the BS flag when it needs to be thrown. And not just to be obnoxious about it, but because you truly care about that individual, and you're not there to be their buddy, you're not there to be their friend, you're there because you're their coach, and you need to take that seriously. And there's a lot of people who are great teachers that are calling themselves coaches. There are a lot of people who are great mentors that are calling themselves coaches. And I really wish that definition wouldn't be so loosely thrown around.
Talk about the difference between coaches and mentors.
Well, I think a mentor is, first of all, I think a coach is first and foremost someone you pay. You have to have skin in the game. If you're not going to take their call because, and you need to pay enough to where it kind of stings. That first time I wrote $10,000 for a coach, I was like, oh man, this check hurts, right? But you better believe when that time for the coaching call came, I was there, I was attentive, I put my phone away, like it was time, right? But and I've since written several $10,000 checks, and I currently pay my current coach $1,000 a month. But that's important. But I think a coach specifically there's an accountability perspective that the coach not only will teach you, they can guide you. I don't have to know everything, but I have to have some certain fundamentals. Like Tiger Woods' coach isn't a better golfer than Tiger Woods, right? They can see your blind spots, and they can call things out when things are not right. Okay. Again, I think a mentor is a little bit different. I think a mentor is really someone who's been down that same road that can guide you to say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. They can be more like a father figure, more like a brother. They're not going to challenge you. I think they might challenge you to a certain degree, but I don't even think a mentor is really someone that you can pay. I've had mentors that I've never paid. I bought them lunch and stuff like that, but I've had plenty of mentors. But I've only had several coaches that I think I paid them, and they were not my friends. They were my coaches. And I think that's the very critical difference. A mentor, again, my definition, argue if you want. I'm saying anybody out there and say, no, you're wrong. But I think that there's lots of information out there, more information than anything else. But I think a coach is really more about accountability and transformation more than anything.
I think you're right. Yeah, I trick people into being my mentors sometimes. I love this story. I had this one fella. We had a financial reversal, and we were actually having a tough time. And we decided we wanted to get back into real estate. We bought a van, lived in the van, and camped in front of this house that was so incredibly trashed you couldn't even walk into it. With no door, no windows. It was completely falling down. So we lived in a van in the yard while we rehabbed the house ourselves. And talk about eating a piece of humble pie to go back and try to just do, we were going to the bathroom in a bucket. We were just really doing what we had to do to make it happen. And we were able to pull it together and keep going. And going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, those core fundamentals. And for me in the military, my core fundamentals were integrity and tenacity. And those are the two that really stuck with me. And, we had more tenacity, integrity, preparation, all these other things. But the integrity, and that's why I named my company that, was the integrity matched with the tenacity, because they matched. They go together. The reason that I have the tenacity to keep going is because I have the integrity to myself and my own vision and purpose, like we talked about at the beginning. I want to
Yeah.
talk about whenever you get somebody, a client, right? So you call them clients. Talk about how it goes with them whenever they start. What's some of the things they say to you in the beginning, as far as because mainly you talk about you want to free up time. Is that the main thing people come to you for?
Yeah, only because I'm pretty. I mean, a lot of times I end up having a coaching call with somebody because a lot of times people just say, "Hey, I think I want to hire you," and I'm like, "Okay, pump the brakes. Let's have a conversation." Because there's nowhere you can't go on my website and just sign up for coaching. There's nowhere that's possible. You can sign up for a call, and where I'll do that like a discovery call, but there's nowhere you can sign up and say, "Yep, I'm ready to go into your coaching program." Does not exist, and it won't ever exist as far as I'm concerned because I am not the coach for everybody. And sometimes people just don't need any more than just maybe a bit of good advice, and which I'm totally about doing. I want people to understand that, and I don't mind donating that time to some people because that lets them know what I'm about and what I'm not about. But, when they come to me, they're like, man, I'm really trying to, gain more sales. I'm like, well, okay, what do you need more sales for? Like, I'm trying to get to, 20 million in sales. And right now I'm at 19.5 and man, I just can't seem to get there. I'm like, okay, cut your expenses by half a million. I don't know what you're like, what are you talking about? Like, why is that so important? Are you talking about sales? Are you talking about revenue, revenue or expenses or profit? Like, what are you talking about? Like your income statement. I mean, why are you coming to me for that? Like, I'm not a growth coach. I'm about time freedom, right? So I'm again, I'm obnoxious about what I am, and I'm almost very obnoxious about what I'm not, because I want to say, well, how is that going to change things for you to get that extra 500,000 in sales or cut an extra 500,000 in expenses or whatever, right? So they're going to say, okay, well, yeah, well, I don't know. It's just a good round number. Okay, so that really doesn't impact your life one way or another if you get 20 million in sales versus 19.5. It's not going to change anything for you. But the when people are coming to me and they start coaching, usually almost always I'm going to have to triage something, meaning that there's something bleeding. They're coming to me with a battlefield injury, and I can't go, well, you should eat more spinach. Like that's not going to help them right now, right? They're like, yes, I get it, but leg is pumping blood. We're like, okay, let's get you triage. Let's stop the bleeding. Let's get you upright and running in a way that's let's salvage the operation, or let's get you upright and running, and then let's start working on some of the critical functions. Again, within those 4 columns. Again, let's get your vision outlined. Let's figure out where you're trying to go. For some people, their vision is to just survive the year, right? That's their vision.
Wow.
And that's where I'm like, okay, then that's your vision. Then let's survive the
Got to
year.
start where you are.
Exactly. A map is only good if you know 2 things: where you are and where you want to go. That's it. So let's build a map. Where are you? Okay, cool. Well, let's get your fix in your position. I'll get out my sextant. We'll figure this out. Okay, cool. Here's where we're at. I understand where you're at now. Where you want to go right now is just survival. Okay, so what's that going to take? Let's, and then I'll go through the financial, side of it because my background in accounting, I can do that. But generally, almost always, the conversation will every now and again, as I'm having these initial conversations with them, the initial coaching sessions, they'll put out these little things like, man, I just want to be able to go camping. Like, man, I had this like what, and they'll mention it very much in passing. And I don't really pull that thread too hard all at once, but I go, camping, you've never mentioned that before. Okay. And then another 2 sessions later, they'll mention camping again. And I'm like, okay, this is a thing, right? So now I can start to help them craft a vision, and I'll say, did you realize, over the last 6 weeks, you've mentioned camping 8 times? And they're like, no, I haven't. And I'm like, well, on this date and this date and this date and this date. And they're like, oh crap. Right. But that's what I want to do, is I want to hold them accountable to what they want, not what I want for them, but what they want. And if they're pissed off at me sometimes, and they will be, but if they're pissed off at me sometimes because, the coach pissed them off, they're like, damn it, he held me accountable and it just really aggravated me. And I knew he was doing the right thing, but I'm pissed at him. And if you're pissed at me while you're looking at a sunset off the back of a yacht, okay, you can be pissed at me then, right? Or you're on a cruise ship watching the sun go down with your significant other next to you, and while you're mad at me, okay, then I've done my job. But those initial calls are usually never about like, oh, I'm so ready to get into my vision, or they're like, oh no, my vision is good. And then I start poking holes in it. And I'm like, really? Like, that's really that important to you? And I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm doing it because I want to test it. If they can defend it to me, then it's right. But a lot of times I'll try to pick it apart a little bit. And usually some people's vision is pretty good. Most are not. But usually, you know, after I get through that initial triage, then doing the vision coaching is really, really important. And then starting to build the infrastructure and processes wherever they're needed, whether that's in the marketing function, the sales function, the operational function, or the accounting function.
Well, you're a measuring stick. They say what gets measured gets improved, and it sounds like we're never really quite ready to look in the mirror and measure ourselves. And this is Mark Dolfini. I think we should go ahead and wrap it up. We've been on for an hour, and I know we have a lot of time we could spend here. Will you? Can we do this again sometime?
Let's do it, man. I can talk about this all day. It doesn't feel like work to me at all. I love. And if there's someone that's watching this that is, you know, really truly, you know, struggling, and this helps you out, you know, and if there's anything I can do to help anybody, just, you know, drop me a line. You can find me easily at landlordcoach.com. You can send a form through the email or through there, or you can email me at mark@landlordcoach.com, mark@landlordcoach.com. Pretty easy to get a hold of. But yeah, I would love to do this any other time and help your listeners out, because honestly, there's too much time that's being spent, you know, working in your business, not on your business, and too much time spending working in your life and not on your life.
That's the truth. All right, Mark, I really appreciate you coming on. I encourage everybody who is interested in finding out about the time freedom, the way that Mark teaches it, go find him. Thanks for go ahead and telling us all your information. You beat me to it. Yep. That's great. I had a note here that says, remember to ask, how do we get in touch with Mark? So that's great. Please reach out to Mark and also comment and tell him how much you enjoyed the great little nuggets. There were a couple in here in this show that I really enjoyed that I'm going to keep in the old noggin. Thanks for joining us, Mark. We will talk to you soon. I'm going to say aloha for now. Aiden, would you like to say aloha?
Aloha.
Aloha from the boss. Y'all have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.